even the ER doctor told me you probably have a torn labrum. And the MRI today came back clear, which is mind blowing to me. And the doctor's like, clearly something's wrong, but we can't find it here. So you might have to have a different variation of MRI. But there's a lot of swelling and stuff. But worst case scenario is not a possibility right now. So it's a good thing. So my name is Kyle Murray. This is the first time I've ever done something like this. So got a little bit of jitters, but yeah. So a couple years ago, I was reading in Mark chapter 5, which is a story where Jesus goes to the place with the man who's got the legion of demons, right? He's cutting himself in the cemetery and doing all the crazy stuff, and Jesus casts the demons out of the man into the pigs, right? What caught my attention about that story, I think it's in verse 19, the man is trying to get into the boat with Jesus when he's leaving. And Jesus is like, whoa, no, I don't need you. Basically, I don't need you to do that. Like, go back to your family and friends and tell them what the Lord has done for you. And that hit me. It's like, that's me. That's what I need to do. Because I don't believe I was possessed by a demon, but I sure had a lot of oppression by him. And so this is what I'm trying to do now, I guess, and I've over the last couple of years, I've prayed, Lord, use my testimony, like tell me how to use it, and just being active and being a part of things. I mean, Douglas is the first guy to plug me in to he recorded my testimony, put it on YouTube, then invite me to do this. So it's like I asked God to give me an outlet, and he's doing it. So that's what I'm going with. So I had a good childhood. I was raised by godly parents. My grandparents are very godly people. My grandmother, when I was like 9 years old, we were in Louisiana, and she walked up to a street performer and started witnessing to him. And as a kid, I was like, oh, grandma, no, but as an adult, I'm like, that's who I want to be. The perspective has completely shifted. Where as a child, I was like, I can't believe this. And then I see, that's just the kind of environment I was raised in. Like, church, my family went to church every Sunday. Prayed before meals. And I remember when I was about 8 years old, I asked Jesus into my life. And I had a good relationship with the Lord. I felt in high school like I didn't do anything wrong. I had, I was aware of sin, and I didn't want to do sinful things. And I was baptized at 17 because I deal with anxiety. And it was just the idea of getting in front of people. And finally I was like, I'm going to do this. But I think what got me was that the fact that my parents raised me in such an environment where they sheltered me from doing things that would have got me in trouble. And when I was 19,
just for a second, the green light is shining on your neck.
When I was 19, I moved out, and all those things that I couldn't do in their house suddenly became available to me. The parties they wouldn't let me go to that I couldn't understand, even though I might not have had intentions of doing it, they just didn't want me to be in those places. And when I moved out, Satan got in my ear and just ran with it. And I started out, I started out waiting tables, and there's a lot of drug use and things that happen in that environment, alcoholism, things like that. And I started hanging out with these people. I started smoking weed. That was my first thing that I got into. And I think Satan uses a lot of lies to convince you that what you're doing isn't that big of a deal, and that it's okay, you're in control of it. And it's just smoking weed. I'm a Christian. I know I'm a Christian. Like, nothing. It's okay. I'm not gonna go to hell for smoking weed. And that's how it started, and it progressed into a 17-year drug problem. I got to where I was just smoking weed initially, and then started smoking all the time, and then started hanging out with a group of people that wanted to go to clubs. And then I started doing harder drugs at clubs. and that felt better and better. And I honestly think that doing the harder drugs opened up depression into my life. Um, I I was taking ecstasy, which is an incredibly euphoric drug, and I couldn't feel that euphoric when I wasn't on it. And I started to, like, my whole life became about seeking this pleasure. Like, I had to have some sort of, like, pick me up. I wasn't content anymore with just being me. And everything really started to center around that. And I I don't think I ever. It took me a long time to even realize that was what was going on, and by then it was too late. But so I started doing the drugs, and I'm doing them pretty regularly. I mean, I'm doing that stuff once a week, and I'm smoking weed all the time. And I just I met a girl at a club one night, and we started going out, and we got married. I was 22 years old when I got married. She was 20, and I mean, I remember before we got married, like, I was trying to lead her to salvation. She was Catholic, and I was trying to get her to, was talking about this, but all the meantime, I'm doing these things, and we were having premarital sex. Like, I had this idea that because I was a professed Christian, that I wasn't doing anything that was gonna be that detrimental to me for some reason, and I just became this liar, basically. I lived this life where my parents thought I was a good, wholesome guy, and outside of being at their house, I was drug abusing, lying. It got to the point to where I became incredibly selfish. I didn't realize how selfish I was, but everything in my life became about my next high or my next pleasure. Whether it was me going to a concert, me traveling, me doing drugs, like, and I took that out on my wife. Like, she got the brunt of, like, I'm not happy, and I'm gonna lash out at you because I'm frustrated because I'm sober and I'm sitting here, and it just spiraled out of control. And about the age of 24, I think I started getting depressed, and I think that was probably the chemical drugs I was doing started messing with my brain chemicals, and I just became a miserable, miserable person, and I lived a double life. Like, again, like, I had this life that my family saw, and then outside of that, I was a monster. I mean, I didn't see myself as a bad person, but everything I did was bad. Like, I was high all the time. I would lie to get whatever I needed. I would, you know, I mean, I would, I mean, you can call it, I guess it is stealing. I mean, I would just hide money in my relationship to buy the drugs I wanted. I would do things without telling my wife that I was doing it, and I kind of became verbally abusive towards her. It just kind of became a free for all of anything goes. And um, so around the age of this, so this started, the depression started when I was like 24, and it got worse and worse. I hated my job, and my wife went to school my ex-wife went to school to be a nurse, and we came up with this idea because I'm all about, like, let's go do something to have fun. She was going to be a traveling nurse, and I was going to tag along. Like, I wasn't going to tell anybody that was what my plan was, but my plan was she was going to make the money and I was going to party. And so that ended up happening. And shortly before that happened, I finally went to the doctor and got on some antidepressants because of the stigma around antidepressants. I didn't want anyone to know that I was depressed. I wanted to hide that from everybody. I didn't want my parents to know. I didn't want any of that. And they helped a little, but I'd never stopped doing the drugs, so it didn't really matter. And so in 2010, she became a traveling nurse, and we started moving around the country. And as we're moving around the country, I think when we left, I took a quarter pound of weed with me in the trailer. Like, we're gonna take off and live. Like, I'm starting the journey out like this, right? And then, of course, I meet people along the way, because that's what drug addicts do, is they find somebody that can plug them in. And I did exactly what I was gonna do. Like, I didn't work, and she worked, and she made really good money, and I just sat at home and got high all the time, and it made my depression worse because we lived in a travel trailer on the road, and I isolated myself in that trailer, and we would move. We lived in like 5 states. She took contract work. I didn't ever know anybody when we went. I never got a job, so I didn't really ever meet anybody. Only people I ever met were the people I was buying drugs from. And my life spiraled out of control, like unbelievably out of control, to where I did not want to live anymore. You know, I became the guy that like would spend his entire weekend in bed, you know, but we were supposed to go do something, plans would fall through, or I remember one time we bought tickets to go see a comedian, and I just got bummed and depressed, and I was like, forget it, I'm not going. I laid in bed all weekend, and you know, I would get high and go back to bed, and I just made her life a living hell. Is really what happened, and then I just hid that from everybody. That's what I was doing to her, and inevitably, she in 2015. So this is from 2010 to 2015. I came home from work one day, and she's like, I want a divorce. We're done. And I'm like, so out of touch with reality. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. What? You know, in reality, like, I think I knew my marriage was over, but she was my money train. You know what I mean? Like, I was more afraid of what my life was gonna become without her than I was in love with her. Like, the fear of me being alone and abandoned was the devastating thing to me, more so than my wife leaving. And so I went to go stay with my sister in Florida for a week, and just devastated and scared. And I'd already been suicidal. And I mean, I had sat in a bathtub with a hair dryer. Like, I would make threats. I wanted her to be scared. And I think part of that was like, I probably knew that she was going to leave me, and I didn't want her to leave me. I wanted her to be fearful if she left me that something was going to happen. I was also crying out of my own like misery, you know, and it was and just reflection. I'm such a terrible person. And so I come back from my sister's, and she comes to the house. She had moved out right before, and she was gone. And she shows up at the house, and I didn't want her there. And I grabbed my bottle of, I had prescription Ambien that I was prescribed to sleep. And I grabbed this bottle of pills, and I'm like, I'm going to take these. And she's like, you're a coward. Go ahead. And I did. And I popped the whole bottle of pills. And I don't remember the next day of my life. I was 5150'd. So God saved my life that day, because I have a friend in California that has never shown up to my house unannounced in his life. Like, he's always the guy that calls. We have plans. 20 minutes after I took the bottle of pills, he showed up at my front door, and my ex-wife was leaving, and he's like, what's going on? She's like, Kyle just took a bunch of pills. He'll be okay. And he's like, well, let me check him out. And he went in, and he said I was laying on the bed, and he slapped me in the face, and I didn't even flinch. And I don't remember any of this. And he's like, I think we need to call 911. And so they called 911 and got me 5150'd. And I was checked into a mental I woke up in a mental institution that I was being held in. I have like 15-second memories here and there that night. I tried to escape the hospital. I don't really remember that at all. They strapped me to the bed. I woke up strapped to the bed because of that. I remember them briefly wheeling me into the mental place, but the really scary thing is if my friend wouldn't have shown up, I was such a drug user that even though I took that whole bottle of pills, I never passed out. Like, I was conscious like the whole time. I could have gotten a car and drove and killed a family. Could have got myself killed. I could have been arrested. Like, and you know, I truly believe God sent my friend there to, like, for whatever, to intervene in what was happening. And I woke up in the psych ward. Of course, I'm depressed because it didn't work. All my problems are still there. I'm embarrassed, you know. And my friend called my parents. My parents flew up. Like, I didn't even want to talk to them, you know. Like, my mom's devastated, and I'm like not even answering the phone when she calls. It's not because I was angry with her, because I was angry with myself, you know, and I couldn't deal with it. And so they held me for 72 hours, and they put me in some pretty intensive counseling after that. It was a thing ordered by like a social worker, to where I went to counseling for like 6 weeks, and it was like daily, and then it tapered off. And that started to change me a little bit. I was already seeing a psychologist or psychiatrist, and I realized at that moment that I'm not going to try to kill myself again, because when I finally did see my mom, like, I mean, she was broken, and I just remember she's devastated beside me, and I'm just like emotionless, and I wanted to do something, but I just couldn't. I was just so out of it and devastated with myself, and so I realized that, that can't happen again. I've got to learn to live. I've got to learn to figure this out. And didn't stop me from doing the drugs, though. In fact, I think it amped up my drug use. So I leave, I get checked out, and I started doing harder drugs. I started doing cocaine all the time. And I refused to allow myself to feel. And so anytime I started feeling anything, I'm on the phone. And the way this all worked out to enable me to do this is that in California, nurses make a ton of money. And she made a ton of money, and she divorced me in California. And I had no heart at the time, and I took a ton of money from her. And so I found myself with no job and a bunch of money and nothing to do, and just a heart full of misery. And so I became the guy who funded the party for a year. And about the span of from probably middle 2015 to the end of 2017, I estimate I spent around $100,000 having fun. It just gone, nothing tangible, nothing to show for it. I paid for people's bar tabs, I paid for the drugs, I paid for my own. I just lived my life in a party. I went to strip clubs, I did whatever I wanted to do to ease my pain. And the whole time this is going on, like I said, I had a church background. I was a professed believer, and it became so easy for me to turn my back on the truth. The farther and farther I got into sin, the more and more I closed my ears to the Lord and to like what I knew to be true. And so in the throes of this drug-fueled depression, I would feel the call all the time of like, you know what you need to do, open your Bible, pray. Well, I would pray, but I wouldn't pray to be healed. I would pray to die. Like, please don't wake me up. I'm done. And in 2017, I did my taxes, and I owed $11,000 to the IRS. I was bringing home about $6,000 a month, working like 12 hours a week. Actually, probably more than that, probably closer to 7. And I was living paycheck to paycheck because it was just flying out as fast as I could get it. I actually called my mom to borrow $200 one month because I just spent it all. And my mom, they knew I was falling apart, and they called me and they said, "Hey, Kyle, why don't you move back home? Like, come back home, get your life in order, and just please, like, you got to get away from this." And so at 37 years old, I decided to move back in with my parents. And the moment I moved back home, it was kind of at that moment that I was like, I can't do drugs anymore. I've ruined my life. Like, I had a lot of money. I have nothing. I had a lot of friends. Those friends disappeared when I stopped doing drugs. I had, all sorts of, I had nothing to show for it. Mentally, I was totally a wreck. And something had to change. And so that's when the aha moment of like, go back to church, like, get your life in order. And so I started going, the moment I moved back with my parents, I started going to church with them, and God started changing my heart, like, drastically. And it was about a 3-year process probably, where I eliminated the drugs immediately. But when I didn't have the drugs, I needed something to continue my feeling of my, being high or what. So I started drinking heavily then, which is no better. And but I stopped doing the drugs and I started drinking, but I started going to church, and I was going to church every Sunday. And then I met another woman, and through the course of 14 months, we got engaged. And she was a churchgoer, And even though I was still doing all this sinful stuff, I thought, okay, God, you're giving me another chance here. Like, I'm working on this. Long story short, 10 days before we got married, the engagement fell apart. She never spoke to me again. Um, we had one argument and it was done. And it broke me. That broke me worse than my marriage ending. That just devastated me because I thought, what is happening here, God? Like, you were making everything right for me. Like, I was happy. And in that moment, that's when Satan, like, boom, came full force back. Within a span of a week, everything I'd ever been tempted with, that I struggled with in my life, was thrust into my face. I was at a country club bar one night. I used to like to go country dance, and a woman walked up to me and offered me cocaine. Like, that doesn't happen in that setting. Like, it was just anything and everything was just trying to suck me back into that life. And I remember I was just so broken. I told my dad, like, why is this happening to me? And he just said, because you're trying to do the right thing, Kyle. He's like, if you want all these problems, these like temptations to stop, then just give in. He's doing this. Satan is tempting you with all these things because he doesn't want you doing the right thing, and you're doing the right thing here. And that stuck with me, and resonated because I was trying to do the right thing. And I think that was another pivotal moment where my eyes were opened of like, you've got to let more go. You've stepped through the door, but you haven't let a lot of this stuff go. And I didn't let it all go. I still kept drinking, but I just started changing. And when my heart was broken, then I started listening to Christian music. I used to be a big heavy metal fan. Like, I was all into heavy metal. I went to concerts all the time, and I didn't find peace in that anymore. I found peace in Christian music, and I started praying more, and that turned into, I started listening to sermons. And where I work in Saxe, I spend a lot of time by myself, and I can put ear pods in, and I just filled my day with the word in some form or fashion, and that just really rapidly began to change my heart and change my desires, and all these things that were once important to me and mattered to me in my life began to fall away. And God took center stage in my life for the first time in probably 25 years or more. And it just continued to progress. And I mean, and I was still drinking. I was still drinking heavily up until a couple of years ago. But the more I get into church, God, and the more I lean on him, God has just trimmed these things from me, like that used to be a crutch are not my crutch anymore. He has become my crutch. And getting into service at the church, and just meeting guys like Douglas and Josh, and just that has just been a whole new avenue of spending my time. Whereas my time was spent self-centered on me and my own happiness and my own pursuit of pleasure, I've now find pleasure in doing God's work. And it's just been a crazy journey, because I remember, and right before I tried to kill myself, actually it was after I had tried to commit suicide, my psychiatrist sent me to a doctor that was, I forgot what they call the procedure, but they basically like send magnetic waves into your brain to try to change your thought process, because I was so depressed. And I remember looking at this guy who deals with these really mentally ill people all the time. And he said, what's your hope? What's going to happen to you in the future? Like, what do you see for yourself in the next 5 years? And with all seriousness, I told this man, nothing. My life is over. Like, I'm dead inside. There's no hope for me. And I remember I told him, if it wasn't for my parents, I would walk out of your office and I would kill myself today. And he just looked at me like, are you kidding me? And that look also was like an eye-opening thing of like, I shocked this man who's here to help mentally ill people. And it's just been this journey of a transformation. And it all started with me leaning back into God. You know, I pulled away and he let me pull away. I became the prodigal son. And then because, and this is why I say ground your kids in the word. Take your kids to church, because if my parents wouldn't have done that for me, I wouldn't know where to go back to. When I destroyed my life and my life fell apart, I knew where to go because that was in me. You know, my parents instilled that in me. My grandparents instilled that in me. And that's what saved my life. I mean, if my mom and dad wouldn't have had the compassion they had on me, I would be dead, because I would have still been in California. I'd still be doing the drugs. My parents inviting me back opened the door for all of this change to happen, because I had to eliminate it, because I'm not strong enough to do it on my own. And I think that's part of the journey, and the things that I've learned is that Satan's a liar, and he will spin that lie in any number of ways to tell you that what you're doing is okay. He'll, just like he did to Eve in the Garden of Eden, when he's like, is God really going to kill you if you eat that? Did he really say you'd die? Surely no. That's the same thing he does to all of us. Like, you just smoke a little weed, it's no big deal. Is anything really going to happen? You know, you believe in him. Like, and then it transforms into, you've gone too far. Now what are you going to do? You can't go back. And then, no, you've destroyed your life. It's done. Like, you're done. Like, you're too far deep. And then it progresses into like, well, now you've ruined your reputation. So what are you going to do for him now? Like, you know, and he always spins that lie to keep you down. And that's just, it's just so eye-opening of how easy it is to fall back into that false, that half-truth. Because I think if you want to heal yourself from addiction, or if you want to heal yourself from you know, some trait you have that you can't get rid of, you've got to ground yourself into something solid, you know. And when God says it's wrong, it's wrong, you know. And I wrote down a verse earlier. You know, it's you got to have a firm foundation to rid yourself of addictions and behaviors. If you don't have something substantial, it's easy to fall back in. You need an absolute truth. When Jesus was tempted by Satan, he rebuffed Satan's temptations with scripture and truth. You have to make up your mind on that truth. You have to say, I'm not going to do blank anymore because God says it's wrong. It doesn't matter if I like it. It doesn't matter if it makes me happy. It doesn't matter if it makes me feel good in the moment. And if you can put that desire into the perspective of eternity and take it out of the present, it's a lot harder for Satan to spin that lie to you. And it's a lot harder for him to tear you down. And there's a lot of reasons to quit doing a lot of the things we do. And the main reason to quit is because God says it's wrong. Because Hebrews 4:13 says, nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we give an account. You know, and it's like, if it's so mind-blowing to me that what Jesus has done for my life and the redemption that I've had, and just bringing me from absolute misery of somebody that thought there's no possible hope for you, you're done. Satan told me after that last marriage or engagement fell apart, I was 40 years old at the time. He said, you're never going to have a family. You're never going to have children. I don't have anything. Well, I have a 9-month-old son now. I have a wife and a happy marriage. I have 2 bonus stepkids. Like, but Satan in that moment was telling me, that's it. You did it again. It's done. You know, it's just, he's such a liar and a manipulator, and he just wants to tear you apart. And in Matthew 19:26, Jesus says, with people, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Because aside from Christ and us, we have no chance to see the kingdom advance. There's no chance for truth to defeat the lies, and for people to be set free from the captivity of sin and Satan. One of my friends at church, Gary Griffin, posted on Facebook the other day, and a little part of it that he had said, you've heard that God helps those that who help themselves. But the reality is God helps those who realize they can't help themselves. And that is how much he loves me, of that I took this good life I had, I utterly destroyed it. I mean, I don't, Paul says he's the worst of the sinners. I think I'm right there beside him, because my life, I was a miserable man. And he paid my debt. He paid my debt. He freed me. He's a chain breaker, and he wants to break those chains for you. All you got to do is lean in, ask him, accept him, make him your savior. It's unbelievable that all the things that he did to free me, and that as a sinful human, I still say jokes that I shouldn't say sometimes, or I laugh at, and you're like, what is wrong? We're so weak. You know what I mean? That's the beauty of it, that the difference between the old Kyle and the new Kyle is the new Kyle sins, but he's repentant. And the new Kyle is growing, and the new Kyle wants to be a better version. He wants to be like Jesus. He wants to shed the old Kyle. And I have a Savior who loves me and who is guiding me in that direction. And when I fail, just like all the times I've failed in the past, I'm so thankful for his long suffering, because I look at me, and I look at how many friends I've been so quick to dismiss over such petty things. And the way I treated my Savior, as who was supposed to have been my friend, disgusting, but yet he still redeemed me, and he still stayed with me through 20 years of carnage and chaos, and just totally turning my back on him. He has redeemed me to the point of I'm a man that wakes up happy every single day. And it makes my wife mad. And she's like, why are you always so happy in the morning? Because I lived for 20 years in absolute misery. Like I was convinced that I could not be happy. And it's amazing. We have an amazing God who does amazing things. And none of it would be possible without him. None of the things that I made it through or will continue to go through are possible without him in my life. I guess the way I'll wrap it up is, Jesus is willing to use me. He's the sinner, the party guy, the fraud, the liar, the cheat. Like, he is willing to use me, and he's willing to use anyone who wants to let him. If you know him and you love him, he wants to use you as well. If you don't know him, make him your Lord today, because we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And I am so thankful that if I had died in the middle of my chaos, and just, it's scary to me. It's really terrifying that, and the fact, one of the most astounding things is that the amount of drugs and dumb things I've done that I'm not dead is one thing, but the fact that I never went to jail, like, he's got a reason for me to be here, and that's been like the most eye-opening thing of all of it is, Lord, I don't know why you've got me here. I tried to take it in my own hands. You didn't let it happen. I tried to end my life in every possible way, and I'm here, and I'm happy, and just tell me what you got for me. So that's my story, and I wouldn't advise anybody to go down that road, but what I also don't know how I don't think I could ever have been in this position without it. I feel like God allowed me to go down that path and struggle that way, because he sees the redemption in all of us. He sees the possibility, and he sees where we can be, So just super thankful.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Sit right there. I'd like some of the men, Leroy and Josh Einhart,